Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you for asking me. I first got the invitation from Mark Donfried, and I thought, well, this is a great chance to talk about a few of the things that have happened to me over the years as a musician. Then he contacted me a few weeks later and said, well, what are you going to talk about? Well, I thought, so I blurted out, if you can blurt on an email, if such a thing is possible. The title came into my mind, The Parallax Effect on Long Hair. So, parallax we normally associate with calculating the distance of an interstellar object by looking at it from two different positions, triangulation in other words. And that's how my life started, really, with a kind of altered perspective from my mum and my dad, who my mother was a school teacher and came from a long line of Victorian conservatives with a small c. My father was working in a factory, and he was from Govan in Glasgow and was a shop steward in the union. And of course, being in the union, he was a Labour Party man. And so I grew up with these arguments, debates, going on every night about politics and current affairs. It was quite distressing, really, as a child, but it wasn't personal, it was purely political. And so I started thinking to myself, well, if we took 50% of what Dad reckons and about 50% of what my mother says, we should be about right on the way we do things. Anyway, they meant well, and decided, against all the odds, that I should go to a private school. And this is a bold decision because we lived on a council estate. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's very nice, affordable housing. It's a nice way to describe it. But I was the only kid on the council estate that went to this private school, and I had to negotiate the long streets and alleyways, wearing a blue striped blazer and a cap. And it was quite a struggle getting to and from school every day, I can tell you. And conversely, at school, I was the only kid in the whole school that lived on the council estate, so the problem was kind of reversed in a way. But it was a great education, and I enjoyed it very much. Particularly the first part, the primary school part. But then, of course, I moved into long trousers, and the transition was a little more uncomfortable, I think. Then people started to train me to be an adult, to behave, to conform, and all that sort of thing. So, and I'd heard one day this stentorian command, Gillan, get your hair cut. And it was a moment in my life. We had to have special kind of haircuts. I was born in 45, and the growing up period, it was all quite conventional. And the haircut then had to not touch your collar, and it had to be over your ears. And of course, this was something I wasn't particularly fond of, but I did have the instructions. So Saturday morning, I went to the barber and said, I'll have a short back and sides, as it was known. And but can you leave it a little longer on top? And it was quite exciting, actually. I went in on Monday morning and I had my inspection, and they looked at me, and the collar was clear and the ears were clear. But there was something wrong with my hair. They couldn't figure out what it was, but it was gradually getting longer on top. And I felt the first teeny bits of rebellion stirring in my mind, because it was that moment in time when you had to choose whether you were going to be a conformist or a rebel. And I think I chose my path because of the haircut at that time. Well, things moved on, and I often reflect on the fact that had I been born in Mecca, it's most unlikely I'd have grown up to be a Catholic. And in fact, I wasn't born in Mecca. I was born in Hounslow, which is West London, near to what was known as the Great Western Aerodrome, which had a grass runway and is now known as London Heathrow Airport, if for your misfortune you ever have to travel through there. Anyway, I'd been to Hounslow College, a private school for my education, and for my spiritual guidance and schooling, I went to a school called the Church of the Good Shepherd, which considered itself to be high church. It was Church of England, but it was Anglo-Catholic, and they called themselves high church. I mean, because they swung incense and made human sacrifices and all that sort of thing. I know, I was one. And And because of the high church, they looked down on the low church, which was difficult because it was further up the hill. But it was anyway, metaphorically, it was that was the way it was. And for my benefit, in order to pass my exams, I had to take confirmation classes and progress to the position where I could be confirmed and then take communion on Sunday mornings. This involved further Bible studies and absorbing things that I had to get into my head so that I could answer questions. And the things that troubled me most was dealing with miracles. Miracles were very hard to swallow. I couldn't grasp the concept of walking on water, and the Immaculate Conception was even more troublesome to me. So I asked kind Father Stubbs, our priest, to explain these things, and he said he couldn't. He said it was God's work and it was beyond all understanding. But these were miracles, and I believed in them. I believed in Father Christmas too, and I believed in fairies. I still do believe in fairies. But anyway, he said, son, you've got to just have faith. And so I believed in miracles, and I went on. And one of the miracles I really wished would happen was to my football team, Queen's Park Rangers, that I supported since I was a little boy. And if any of you follow football, you'll see that they still do need miracles, big time. But I used to go and watch them with my dad and my little friend. We used to stand at the bus stop on Saturdays, the same bus stop I used to go to school. And it was always freezing in the winter. We weren't adequately clothed, and the timetable was rotten. The buses were not nearly so frequent on a Saturday as they were during the week. So we would stand there and keep going back to look at the timetable, see if we'd made a mistake or looked at something, but no, nothing. Dad, when's the bus coming? Well, nothing really. Then he would say, look, kids, if you count backwards from 5 to 0, the bus will arrive. So we did 5, 4, 3, 2. Whoa! The bus appeared around the corner at the end of the road. It's a miracle. Dad, how do you know when the bus was going to come? He said, son, it's one of those things you'll understand when you grow up. And I wanted to grow up immediately. I wanted to be an adult. I wanted to understand these things that only grown-ups knew. And anyway, I let my hair grow a little longer, and when I left school, I drifted into music. It wasn't unnatural because I came from a musical family. My grandfather was a singer. He was a bass baritone, sang opera very well, not professionally, but he could still make the walls move when he was 70 years old. My uncle was a jazz pianist, and I was a boy soprano in the church choir when I was young. And then I left school and got involved with music. And for 2 or 3 years, I was a semi-professional. In '65, I joined a band called Episode 6, where I met Roger Glover, the bass player, who's still with me now in Deep Purple all these years later. We joined together in '69 as a singer and songwriter and bass player as a team together. And that band, Episode 6, it was all right. We had a record deal, but we didn't play very big venues or anything like that, colleges, school dances, clubs, and that sort of thing. And one day, I think it was in Maidenhead, we had set up our equipment, no road managers in those days, but you remember that, Marcia? Yes. We had set up our equipment, and we decided to repair to the local pub next door for some refreshment before the show. And so we were standing quietly, well-behaved in the corner. My hair was a little longer then. It was about the Beatles time, just after the Beatles. And so we were almost shoulder length. It was getting longer. But we were neat and tidy and well-behaved. And across from the other side of the room, an old lady. She went potty, really. I mean, she walked across the room. Everything went quiet, and she went up to me and she put her hands on her hips like that and looked up and said, young man, your hair is outrageous. And I didn't know what to say. I mean, how do you respond to something like that? I mean, I couldn't be rude to her. I'd been nicely brought up, and so I didn't know how to respond. And I was thinking of something to say when I noticed there was a lot of tittering going on around the room, people laughing like this, and gradually the laughter exploded. It became infectious, as it does, and people were falling on the floor. And I looked at her really for the first time, and I saw her hair. It was bright blue, and it had been sprayed with some kind of fixative that made it look as if she was wearing some alien helmet of some kind. So it really depends where you stand, I suppose, when you criticize people's hair. The hair grew a little longer, and it became more troublesome. And we were negotiating, well, I wasn't personally, but I was involved in negotiating a contract for a concert in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia some years later with my band. And I remember two of the key elements in the contract. It took a year to negotiate, but it was a key contract on our Far East tour, so we were quite prepared to wait. The first problem was about the lyrics. They wanted to check all the lyrics and have them interpreted, and it was a clause in the contract that I couldn't change any of the words. I do it all the time anyway, because I can never remember them, but they were very insistent. And at the time, you can understand why. There was a thing called the British disease. There were strikes going on. There were long-haired musicians creating anarchy and insurrection all over the world, and everyone was scared of it. In fact, I remember at the time, in the Soviet Union, it was banned. Our music was banned all over the place. In fact, I had the pleasure of talking to President, now Prime Minister Medvedev, when he told us that he had to apply for special permission to play or acquire a Deep Purple record when he was at school for the music club. And I also remember a chap in Poland that I met who had been caught in possession of a Deep Purple record, and he was sent to prison for 2 years. Imagine that. I personally thought he should have got a little longer, but it was... Anyway, I found out later that a lot of people had learned how to speak English by listening to the lyrics of rock albums and rock songs. The other issue was the hair, and there was another clause in the contract. I remember it word for word. The boys in the band shall not allow the hair to fall upon their shoulders. This is a problem because some of us had very long hair by now, almost down to here. And the keyboard player, you know Marcia, Colin Towns, he was the keyboard player in my band at the time, and he had quite short hair, so that was not a problem. Didn't reach his shoulders. Our bass player was bald, so that was okay. But the other three of us had quite long hair, and so we had to get hats, and we figured out some way of dealing with it. And the day before the show, there was a press conference, and it went quite well. It was well attended, and so we looked forward to the concert. And just before the show, the Minister of Culture came to my dressing room with his children and said, well, I thought the press conference went very well yesterday. And, you know, Ian, if accidentally after 3 or 4 songs your headdress happens to fall off, it will be all right. By this time, they weren't worried about insurrection or any of the British disease components, so they thought things were going to be all right. I called a cameraman over to record the conversation because it actually was in the contract, so I wanted some backup in case things went wrong. But it didn't cause any problem at all, but they did go potty after 3 songs. Our headdresses came off, and the 18,000 kids just went absolutely mental. And it was wonderful to see, because it didn't cause any harm at all. I don't know what all the fuss was about in the first place. And then the hair grew even longer, and we were traveling in strange places and exotic places, and I was, excuse me a second. I found myself in Zaporozhye, on the banks of the river Dnieper in Ukraine, at the invitation of the Cossacks. Don't ask me why, but for some reason we've been invited there. It's rock and roll, believe me. Strange things happen. And we were in this town called Zaporozhye on the river, and we were there in the afternoon. It was a day off, no concert, and lots of kids playing in the sandy beaches. It was a wonderful day. And my hair by then was down to here, and my bass player's hair was down to his waist. And we were kicking a football around on the beach, and there were lots of kids there trying to come laughing at us, basically, because we had long hair and had funny accents. But they were playing with our football and our rugby ball and our baseball bat and having a great time. And I saw another group of kids they seemed as if they were practicing some Olympic event. They were throwing a discus into the river. And so I wandered across with my interpreter. I have to remember there are interpreters helping me out all the time here, so there may have been a few Chinese whispers along the way, but mostly we got to the bottom of it. And this kid, he beautiful style, and he went, wow, like that, and the discus flew out into the river. And he and all his little mates, they jumped in the water and started swimming after it, retrieved it, shook it off, and I was looking at it. It wasn't a discus at all, it was a tortoise. And I said, how could you? What are you talking about? Why are you doing this with this tortoise? And he looked at me as if I was mad. He said, well, he's our family pet. We bring him from Moscow every year on holiday. He loves it. I had a word with the tortoise later, and his story was somewhat different to the kid. But anyway, the sun went down, and at the end of the day, we were led into the forest where we were to meet the Cossack chiefs. The Cossacks had been proscribed, rather like most religions, by Stalin, and over the years it was very difficult for them to be open about their tribe and their activities. And in fact, the symbol of their very existence, the Zaporozhian Cossacks, had been chopped down many years before, a 600 or 700 year oak tree, known as the Cossack tree. And I was honored to be able to climb up it, and in 1990, I think this was, and in fact saw some little green shoots in the branches, so it seemed to be symbolic of the times. Then we went further into the forest where some trestle tables were being set up and in preparation for our feast. A big fire was lit and some huge animal was being burnt on it and cooked, and the table was being set with simple food, bread, fruit, and bottles of vodka and wine and big jugs of beer. And it was explained to me about the beer that it was very important that we drink it quickly. As I said, something may have been lost in translation here, but it was very important to drink it quickly because it contained no preservatives. And okay, I said, well, we'll do our best to help you out here. So they emerged from the darkness, and we all sat down, and I was greeted by the assistant to the head of the Cossacks, the Zaporozhian Cossacks, who welcomed me, and after his short speech we had to raise a glass and have a toast of vodka and some beer, of course, before it went off, because it contained no preservatives. And then the leader welcomed me effusively, was very kind, and said it was a great honor to have me there and my fellow musicians, and he said he was glad to know that my father was from Scotland. And I said to my interpreter, how does he know my father's from Scotland? He said, well, they know everything. They've researched your visit, and it's very important to them. I said, well, I'm honored, and it's great. And he said, you finished off by saying, yes, I'd like to make a toast now to the land of your father, the Scottish people, a great fighting nation. And so, I mean, I don't know whether he was talking about Bannockburn in 1314 or Wembley in 1989, but anyway. So we had some vodka and we had some beer, which had to be drunk quickly because it contained no preservatives. And the speeches went on and round the table, and I think I was about 10th or 15th in line after all these toasts. I was feeling a bit wobbly. And so I got up and I thanked them for their lovely welcome and what a great honor it was to be there in these circumstances. And I tried to explain something, but I was a bit muddled by then. And I said I'd been in Ukraine for a few days, and I realized I was by the river, and I'd been swimming in the river Dnieper in Kiev just a couple of days ago. And I heard this. I said, what's going on? He said, they hate the people from Kiev. They hate them. The Cossacks from Zaporozhia have been at war with the Cossacks from Kiev for 600 or 700 years. They can't even remember how it started. Oh, blimey. He said, you've done it now. So I had to think quickly, and I said, right, well, you see, what I'm trying to say is that I was swimming in the river Dnieper 2 days ago, and it was freezing cold. And today, I was swimming in the same river 200 kilometers downstream, and it was much, much warmer. The reason is, because when I was in Kiev, I peed in the river, because I can't stand those Cossacks from Kiev. I can't stand them. Which made them very happy. Anyway, eventually the hair got shorter and we all grew up a little bit. But some years ago, I was back in Hounslow visiting my old chums and having a look at the church and the school and the places where I grew up. And I happened to go past that bus stop where we waited on so many Saturday afternoons for so long for this wretched bus to come along. And I recalled my father's words. He died when he was 57, and I was 27, I think, when he died. And I hadn't been back there for a long time. And I looked up and I said, I wonder if the old magic's going to work. So I went 5, 4, and I looked, I said, my God. And I could see the little red bit of the top of the bus just going over the roof, and it came around the corner, and I thought, it's not a miracle after all. And now I know what my dad was saying. He said, Dad, he said, son, you'll understand when you grow up. Thank you.